And now let us move forward to the final panel in today's program, which as you will have seen already, of course, foresees input and an exchange with colleagues from the European Commission on the wider topic of the European Union's approach to minding the education, research and innovation gap. Now, of course, the topic of synergies as such is not a new one in new policy circles. Enhancing the knowledge triangle has been there with us as a policy goal for quite some time, but I think we can agree that in the past couple of years, and that relates to a number of policy and program developments, we have new momentum and we have reached to an understanding that we need to make further efforts into aligning these goals. We're lucky to have in the session with us today two prominent colleagues from the European Commission, and let me briefly introduce them to you before handing them over the floor. The first is Vanessa Debiais-Sainton, who is Head of Unit for Higher Education in the Directorate General for Education and Culture. Vanessa is coordinating a unit that manages, as many of you certainly know, important files such as the European University Initiative, automatic mutual recognition, higher education qualifications, as well as, of course, very importantly, the higher education arm of the Erasmus Plus program and of the next Erasmus program. And together with Vanessa in this session is Apostolia, or Leah in short, Karamali, who is Head of Unit for Academic R&I and Research Organizations within the Directorate General for Research and Innovation, or DGRTD in short. The unit that Leah coordinates, designs, implements and monitors policy initiatives in support of higher education institutions, research organizations and researchers as part of the European research area, but not only. They have prepared for us a joint presentation, which is, I think, in perfect sync with the topic of synergies that we are addressing today. So I'd like to warmly give you the floor for an update, both in terms of policies and programs at EU level.
Thank you very much, Irina. And I would like to thank everybody for all. Hello, now everything works, I hope. So thank you for the introduction. Despite the order of the mentioned in the program, I will start. So I am Leah Karamali from DG Research and Innovation. I will start this presentation, but as Irina already announced, we're going to interact with Vanessa because we have prepared this jointly. First of all, I would like to thank you for all the useful examples and suggestions that were mentioned before. I think this is a topic where we all agree in principle, and the challenge ahead of us is to make it work in practice. In other words, come up with a functional toolbox that can be at the service of citizens, be them students or researchers in our institutions in general. So we have prepared the presentation, which should not be considered exhaustive, but rather illustrate some key examples of areas where working together. So first of all, this is the outline of our presentation. We are going to share with you information on how we're trying to address synergies at the level of our policies, at the level of the respective programs we are managing, then what we can do for projects, institutions and people, and then other cross-cutting aspects such as international cooperation, citizen engagement and outreach. And without further ado, let me start with the policy dimension. As Irina already announced, the key policies which are concerned in this area are the European research area and the European education area, with a very increased focus on towards the universities of the future, and we will come back with more details on that. So first of all, as already announced by previous speakers, the fact that we have one commissioner, Commissioner Gabriel, responsible both for research and innovation as well as for education, culture and youth, makes this synergies effort even more binding politically. There is a strong engagement to make these two policies, European research area and European education area, work together. Although they are distinct policies, still they're intertwined, and they're both instrumental in delivering quality and values to our society and citizens. And they cross and cooperate in many areas, such as investments, reforms, how to address talent, how to address the digital dimension, international dimension, and so on. But we come with more details later on. So let me start with by briefly recalling the broader context we're operating at. So first of all, of course, we have a broad long-term policy objectives, and we are all challenged by a very unprecedented crisis, and also an effort towards recovery and actually making a fresh new start without losing sight of all the long-term objectives that we have. So therefore, we share an objective for competitive sustainability. In other words, further pursue the transitions for the Green Deal, and make sure that we mobilize all the sectors of the economy, and both education and research towards this objective. We both share the challenge of digital transformation, and we are being through this at the moment. We have to make this sustainable for the future. And of course, as I said before, we all need to address the recovery in the most effective way without looking backwards, as our commissioner, as our president von der Leyen has repeatedly recall, but rather thinking of what we can deliver for the next generation, hence the name of Next Generation EU for the recovery package. So let me say a few words about the European research area, and then Vanessa will further develop the European education area and the universities. So first of all, we are in a process in the European research area where, of course, we don't start from scratch. There are 20 years of heritage of the European research area in terms of efforts, and even 10 years of it being deeply embedded in the treaty for the functioning of the European Union. So there are many lessons learned from the past, and we are now in the process of seeing how we can revitalize it, to use a term which is being used at the Council, or renew our approach for the future, of course, taking into account all these policy contexts that I was mentioning before. And we're looking at three main objectives for that, which are listed here in the slide. There could be others, as this communication, of course, is now under preparation. For example, but the key, let's say, principles that come from our discussions, also with taking the inputs from stakeholders, are directionality, inclusiveness, and connectivity. Directionality means joining forces, which is the history of the European research area and the history of the European Union, by the way. Joining forces towards shared objectives, towards investment, towards making Europe a leader in all the areas we think this is useful to. Inclusiveness means, while pursuing excellence, also making sure that we include all the actors and all the sectors of the economy and the society. And connectivity is connecting the dots, what it means, and making sure that that we interact at European, at national, at regional, even local level. We promote place-based innovation, for example, and so on. So these are the broad objectives we're pursuing. And in that, of course, we're looking at what we can do for the labor market of researchers, what we can do more, how we can promote growth, how we can address what we can do for institutions, and how we can find solutions for the economy and the society. And of course, we're addressing both institutional aspects, legal and financial barriers, but also support services. And I'm glad that some of the elements we're working on have been mentioned, such as the European universities, or even Euraccess support services, for example, just to illustrate. Now, let me pass the floor to Vanessa to further develop the European education and area and higher education aspects. Vanessa.
Thank you very much, Leah. So I don't have yet such a beautiful slides to present in the European education area, simply because the timeline is slightly different. As you can see on the the slide. Okay, I lost the view of the slides, but it's okay. The communication, the European research area is going to be presented early this summer, while the communication, the European education area will be presented this autumn. The European education area will cover all the different fields of education training, including school education, adult education, vocational education training, as well as youth. But of course, there is an obvious link with the European research area, which are our joint work together with DG Research Innovation on the transformation of higher education institutions into the universities of the future. And this is Ulrich said it rightly at the beginning of this webinar. What we have seen with this COVID-19 crisis is the need to accelerate the transformation of the higher education sector, of the higher education institutions on all their different missions. And this is where we will have some ring elements between the two communications that forms the two legs of the European knowledge strategy, which is the overarching strategy beyond these two areas. And here there are common objectives with this European knowledge strategy, which is to inquire, to include all different learners and the types of higher education institutions, so that no one is left behind, include all types of researchers as well and staff. It's important to invest in this European knowledge strategy, and we'll come back to that later on in our presentation, and to innovate. Important to innovate both in education but also in research. So these two communications will not develop a full narrative on the European universities yet. What these two communications will present is a roadmap of initiatives and of actions that will be rolled out in the coming years. So before I present some of these elements that will be addressed by the European education area, I would just like to complement what Sabine and Fernando said previously on Epicure and Arcus, two of the 17 European universities. We made a very quick survey in the course of May to assess the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. And here it was very interesting to hear from all the more than 100 higher education institutions that are taking part in these first European universities. More than 60% of them consider that being part of European universities has put them in a stronger position to face the pandemic. And these are certainly the ones that were more advanced in the implementation, while more than 96% wished their European university was fully operational before the pandemic. Why? Because those that are already prepared have been able to put together what they have in common in terms of online resources, online teaching and training, share common learning, teaching infrastructure and an environment for their learners and staff to share and to cooperate together, but the same on the research side as well, to share data and research infrastructure. So it shows that there is even more need for deeper cooperation between higher education institutions, but also between universities and their surrounding innovation ecosystem. So if we move to the next slide. Thank you very much. Last Friday, we had a webinar, a joint webinar between the 17 European universities and the member states, the representatives from all the ministries. And it was very interesting to discuss together what are the challenges that these European universities are facing, and that can be the catalyst for further policy development that will be beneficial to the wide higher education community. So this is why in this communication, the European education area, we want to take the lessons learned already and to address them. So we will propose a council recommendation on European universities next year to address these challenges, but that will not only impact the European universities, but also the wide higher education community. Building on such an instrument, what we are aiming at is to develop a collective vision on the universities of the future, targeting all types of higher education institutions, but also covering all their missions. So not only on education and training, but also, as importantly, on research and innovation leading to service to society. And this, we want to develop it collectively with all of you, with the wide higher education community and research community as well together. And this is really a joint work between DG IAC and DG and we will organize quite a number of targeted consultations in the second half of the year to really co-develop it and co-create it together with all of you. Now, to make this collective vision, we have already identified some policy developments that are necessary for deeper cooperation within the sector. So one of them is the setup of a European degree. Where basically when a student will benefit from learning training opportunities, not only from one or from two universities, but from several of them, which is the objective of our future vision of universities. So we need to be able to recognize and to award such innovative and important training. And this is one of the commitments that we received from the European Council in their conclusions of December 2017. So this is one area where we want to further cooperate with you to develop it, and we are in a brainstorming stage currently, but we hope next year to be able to put forward some proposals. We are also exploring jointly together with DG and I to explore the feasibility of European university stages. What they told us is that they need to set up a stages to be able to share budget, to share staff, to share resources, and for that stages need to be found. So some different European universities are currently testing different stages. So we will build on that together with other different studies to explore the feasibility of such a European statute that would benefit not only the European universities, but all higher education institutions which would like to deepen their cooperation. Another field, excuse me, Leah, I'm almost finished, not yet. Another area that we have identified as a way to further develop our policies. This is the setup of a European approach for micro-credentials. What does it mean? Today, what we see is that Europe, and not only Europe, is going to face an unprecedented economic crisis. The workforce will need to be retrained, upskilled, reskilled on certain areas. And here, higher education has a key role to play in developing short learning courses that are leading to micro-credentials so that it can be recognized either for further learning or by employers on the private sector. So our commissioner, together with Commissioner Schmidt, have put in place a group of experts. They met for the first time on 26th of May. And we started discussing a common definition for this micro-credential, which is currently missing. And also we started discussing a roadmap of actions that would boost the take-up, but also the validation and the recognition of such micro-credentials, where again we would like to increase the role of higher education in that respect. And last but not least, what universities need to develop such a vision and to develop and to become universities of the future, we need to develop a European quality assurance system that is more flexible and that it is fit for purpose to develop such deeper cooperation in learning and teaching activities between higher education institutions. So in a nutshell, these are the initiatives that most probably may be announced in this communication in the European education area, and they will be further developed together with you in the months and years to come. So now we need programs, European instruments, to be able to support these policies that will be announced in both communications, European research area and European education area. So I will not, so one obvious action that will really implement the necessary synergies between education and research is obviously the European Universities Initiative, but not only. I'm not going to present again the concept because it was very well done by Sabine and Fernando previously, but maybe what I would like to share with you today is the feedback that we discussed last week with the European universities in terms of reforms that they are going to accelerate, already starting for some of them, starting in September for the new academic year, which is putting in place a fully functional digital European inter-university campus where they can put together the universities together, their online learning and training opportunities for all their students so that they can benefit from learning opportunities not only from one, but from all the members of this alliance. And for this, they are developing and sharing joint digital learning environments with common digital governance tools. This will allow them already from the next academic semester to propose joint teaching units and blended courses and blended mobility to all, well, to many of their students and staff. And they are as well developing these joint teaching units and blended courses in cooperation with their innovative surrounding ecosystem to implement a challenge-based approach together with companies, regions, and cities, not only to develop micro-credentials, but to work together on learning and training offers, but also on research opportunities together. So that was in a nutshell what I wanted to share with you today. Now, if we move to the next slide, Leah will present you the complement from Horizon 2020 for the research innovation dimension of these European universities.
Thank you, Vanessa. I see that we are running out of time, so I will try to accelerate the presentation of the remaining slides. So again, on my side, I'm really happy today to listen to the very positive reaction of the 2 of the 17 European University Alliances today about their support to this Horizon 2020 action for European universities. On our side, we also share a lot of the enthusiasm that this can be helpful in this very important endeavor. So indeed, the deadline for the submission of proposals for the first batch is this week. So we're looking forward to receiving all your proposals and seeing how we can bring together the 2 dimensions, the 2 very important dimensions of universities we're discussing here today. We have worked on the basis of a guidance document that lists a number of challenges. We have called them transformation modules for research and innovation that you can see here on this slide. That go from developing common science agenda, sharing resources and infrastructures, actions for the human capital, researchers in particular, mainstreaming open science, engaging with citizens and society, reinforcing academia-business cooperation on the research side, focusing on the knowledge transfer, and finally exploring joint structures. The second, as soon as we have the results of the second call of Erasmus, of course, we will proceed with the invitation to the second batch of European universities to submit proposals for Horizon 2020 and thus complete the family of the Horizon 2020 testbed or project portfolio. As we look now towards the future for the next MFF, of course, we're looking into how we can mobilize Horizon Europe in a synergetic way with other union programs, in particular, in this case, Erasmus, but also InvestEU, ERDF, ESF, to share common objectives, especially when it comes to institutional actions and mobility and increasing opportunities by joining forces. The synergies are a very important dimension of Horizon Europe, and we're looking into how this can be done in practice, and we hope that the experience that you have now with the top-up of Horizon 2020 is a good example of how we can join forces going to the same direction, although there may be some administrative work to pursue still. I think it shows that we're working hand in hand towards pushing towards common objectives. The big highlight when it comes to the next MFF, of course, is Next Generation EU and the recovery of the EU out of this crisis. And research and innovation is very prominent in the recent Commission proposals, both with a booster, allow me the term, to Horizon Europe, to focus especially on the necessary transitions and also the recovery of the actors of the economy. You can also find very important trace of research and innovation also in other building blocks of the recovery plan, in particular under the actions for member states in the resilience facility, for example. And now we have to see, of course, we have to see what will be the reactions from Council and Parliament and softly see how this can work in practice. But this is only the beginning. We just had the Commission proposal. And of course, needless to say that there has been, I don't have to recall all the different actions that the Commission has taken for research to support the handling or the response to this crisis, ranging from flexibility for ongoing projects to the pledge event to increase the budget and join forces for the important actions, in particular for finding treatments and vaccines and testing methods, going of course up to the cooperation with member states, what is known as the ERA versus Corona action plan developed jointly with the Council in order to see, have a very first example of how the European research area can work in practice. And when we're looking towards the future, of course, we're looking towards an integrated recovery plan that takes into account the education dimension. But let me pass the floor now to Vanessa for these additional elements.
There will be as well an Erasmus recovery action where the objective is really to support all higher education institutions in developing this deeper cooperation step by step. So through all the different cooperation projects that will be available through the program, with the objective to make higher education greener, more digital and more inclusive. You see that the starting point in the budget that has been proposed by the Commission is already reinforced as compared to the current budget, but of course, as Leah said, this is only a starting point of the coming discussions. And the objective will be to build strong synergies with all European instruments in order to support all higher education institutions in developing step by step their transformation into the universities of the future. They will need the support not only from Erasmus+, not only from Horizon Europe, but also from the structural funds, Digital Europe, InvestEU. So this is why we are building strong synergies with all these instruments, and they will need as well on top support from their national governments as well. But the objective is really to use all these instruments in the same direction, in this collective vision that we'll develop together. Now, maybe more concretely, and building on the excellent already reflection paper that you have put forward, and based on all the previous very interesting discussions that we had just before. Indeed, our objective is really to boost the synergies with research beyond the European universities with a step-by-step transformation, with the objective, as was said previously, to equip the students with the 21st century skills, including critical thinking. And here, this is why it is so important that all students from all disciplines and at all levels be exposed to research teams as early as possible in their courses. It can be through internships in research teams. It can be through inviting researchers to teach and to share their experience and their research work together with the students. But even better than that, to work together with the students, with companies, cities and regions on their research work. So this is what we want to further develop in the future Erasmus program in synergy with Horizon Europe. So some examples in the very concrete examples. Yes, if we move again forward. So this exposure to research from students and staff, it can be done, as I said, through mobility internships to Horizon-funded research teams, but also to really have in these different projects, be it Erasmus or Horizon, to invite either researchers in the Erasmus projects or to invite Erasmus students and staff in the Horizon project to further develop these synergies, expose young people to this critical thinking mindset, but also give the opportunity to the researchers to feedback into education about the results of their research, and also to learn from the latest research results in terms of innovative pedagogies. How can we, through Erasmus, better exploit the research results in innovative pedagogies to further develop and further innovate in curriculum development and in teaching and learning? We will as well further develop opportunities for doctoral candidates so that no matter what their status is, they can benefit from a wide range of opportunities through Erasmus, which are generally short-term opportunities, but that are complementary to the opportunities provided through the Marie Curie actions. And Lia, you want to complement on that, on researchers?
Yes, thank you, Vanessa. So indeed, the issue of mobility has been raised before. So indeed, this remains an important priority. The balanced brain circulation of research and innovation talents, as well as education talents, of course. How we can boost teaching skills of researchers to transfer research results into education. So this is a very important element, a challenge for synergies. And also to boost permeability and employability of talents across different sectors, borders, and disciplines. We're looking into questions of how we can retain and attract talent, how we can create transnational ties between researchers within and outside Europe. This is about attracting talent from outside Europe, and of course, how to better access intersectoral mobility and how to incentivize mobility in less obvious destinations. Now, the last part of our presentation is about the cross-cutting aspects, as I mentioned before at my introduction. So here we're looking at the geopolitical dimension, the citizen engagement, and outreach. Regarding the international aspects, it's needless to say that in order to be a leader in the global geopolitical context, we need to have an openness to the world. We need to establish strategic partnerships, both for research as well as for education. This is to address several aspects, for example, the technological sovereignty, or looking at student visas around the world and attracting talent, as I was saying before. It should be about offensive and defensive interest. And just to illustrate illustrate an example of a recent activity to which you have, some of you have been associated, the issue of foreign interference in higher education institutions, where we have been working together with our colleagues from DGAC in order to develop guidelines for higher education institutions and research organizations in general on how to address foreign interference threats. Citizen engagement is another example. This is about engaging with our society, assuming responsibilities both from the research and education dimension in promoting values to society and citizens, in promoting lifelong learning and democracy. And last point on my side, outreach. So again, I said at the beginning, this is not an exhaustive presentation, but if I want to flag a major outreach event, which will be completely virtual, especially in this complex situation that we find ourselves in, is the second edition of the Research and Innovation Days, planned for the 22nd to the 24th of September this year, where we plan to address have a broad debate on the European Research Area communication, which will hopefully be published by that time. And under the guidance of our Commissioner Gabriel, we will have specific events on synergies between research and education, synergies between the European Research Area and the European Education Area, hopefully with a communication on the European Education Area adopted by that time. And also consultation and exchange of views on the universities of the future, addressing both dimensions. And with this, I pass the floor to Vanessa, and thank you very much for your attention.
This is the last slide. I will finish with this one. In terms of outreach, we're going to launch a wide public consultation in the coming weeks to take the lessons learned from the COVID-19 crisis, to be able to take that into account before presenting the renewed digital education action plan. So we will invite the wide higher education community, but not only, all pupils, teachers, parents, to share with us their feedback from this experience, so that we can learn from it and propose adequate solutions to that for the month and years to come. We will have as well numerous targeted consultations to co-develop together this vision for the universities of the future, and we will co-organize it together with the unit of LIA. We have as well, a similar event than the RNI Days, which is the Education Summit, which is a fantastic opportunity to discuss the progress made, but also to look forward to the future in terms of education and learning. We are still discussing whether this will take place this year still or early next year. And I see that there are quite already a number of questions in the chat box that we'll be very happy to reply.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Vanessa, and thank you very much, Leah, for this true tour de force presentation. If I may say, you've highlighted a number of times. It's not a comprehensive one, but I can tell you that at least from my end, it sure look very, very close to that. Clearly, a number of very exciting developments coming up, both on the policy framework as well as concrete programs at EU level. And indeed, because we do have quite a number of questions here addressed already and limited time available, let's just quickly jump in with the first set of questions for Leah, and the first one relates to what is particularly meant through inclusiveness in the European research area and in the strategic objective of more inclusive and fair R&I systems. So Leah, can you
Yes.
tell us a bit more of how inclusiveness is defined in this framework?
Yes. I see there is some delay in showing up the video. Yes. Okay, but you can hear me. Okay, so as I was saying before, the communication and how the Commission's position on the future of ERA is still under preparation, of course, right? So we hope to be able to adopt this communication before the summer break. Nonetheless, there has been an extensive interaction with the Council, with an opinion provided by the European Research Area Committee, pointing to these three objectives I was mentioning before as a position coming from member states, in particular with respect to directionality, inclusiveness, and connectivity. So we think what is meant with inclusiveness in this new context of ERA is meant that we need to include all actors, all sectors, and all dimensions of Europe in the effort and the strive to excellence. We should leave no one behind. Another example or another phrase which is known is how to advance Europe together. So there we take into account, among other things, the widening dimension of research and innovation, of course, and as I said before, including all actors. So this is, let's say, the spirit of this objective. And here we're thinking and we're analyzing different actions on how to address and fulfill the objective.
Well, thank you very much for this answer, and maybe as a follow-up clarification question, still both for you, Leah, and for Vanessa. It's not there in the questions raised by the audience, but you referred in your presentation to the EU Knowledge Strategy, which was received with quite some excitement some months ago when Commissioner Gabriel made a first reference to the strategy. Now, if I understood correctly from your presentation, basically the strategy will be supported by the two upcoming communications, so on the European research area and on the European education area as main pillars, and they will be linked somehow through the wider developments that are happening within the framework of the Universities of the Future discussions. So will the strategy concretely consist of that, or will there be a broader, let's say, umbrella dimension linking the different pillars?
So maybe
yes, everything is under discussion at the moment, but it's the way we will articulate both the European education area and the European research area and all the supporting instruments in that direction. It's really to articulate and the synergies between these two legs. Leah, you wanted to add something.
No, Vanessa, I think this is the essence of the answer. Thank you very much. Nothing to add there.
Okay.
Well, then let's continue with you, Vanessa, and a number of questions. I think, well, very much expected. A number of them refer to the European Universities Initiative. A first very concrete one relates to the when the selection results of the second call are likely to be announced. And also, perhaps in that context, a question about the selection criteria of whether the link between education and research has been amongst the main criteria for evaluation.
Yes, so the results will be announced in the first half of July. The executive agency and the experts are working very hard to maintain this timeline despite the crisis, but we managed to all work independently from home and to stick to the timeline. Now, regarding the evaluation criteria, they are the same as in the first call. Can you hear me? Yes. And of course, this articulation between education and research is present in all the award criteria. First, in the strategy and the relevance of the strategy proposed by the Alliance. Secondly, in terms of the work packages to support this strategy, and within this strategy, these synergies are very important, as I highlighted in the call. Then it is also evaluated in the context of the capacity of the partners to implement the strategy, and finally in the dissemination.
Right, maybe two final questions very briefly, 1 minute to answer, Vanessa, on two very different topics. On the one hand, micro-credentials, if you can give us some examples of which topics could be or would be covered. And then clarification question related to blended mobility and the proportion that you see or the European Commission foresees as desirable between digital and physical mobility components.
Well, I will start with the second question. There is no one-size-fits-all answer to that question. First, because we're going to start with blended mobility, piloting it now as from the next academic year. We don't know yet when physical mobility will be feasible again. So we're not going to set an ideal proportion. And of course, it depends as well on the purpose of the blended mobility, depends on the context in which it will take place. So here it will be based on the evaluation of the national agencies and the higher education institutions themselves, and we'll be learning by doing all together. Now, regarding the micro credentials, the first objective is to come up with a common definition that is fit for purpose, not only for higher education, but also for vocational education and training, etc. So this is the first element where we are progressing, because now what is hampering the development of short learning modules leading to micro-credentials is this lack of common understanding. So that's the first objective. Then we discussed the very important challenges in this policy development. One that came back very frequently is to ensure the portability of these micro-credentials across the sectors between VET, higher education, but also across the countries. The importance of transparency and the importance of quality. And here the quality, we had many lively discussions that will continue in the months to come. Of course, we have already in place a number of tools and instruments in the field of higher education, like the CTS, the ESGs, the quality assurance framework, but is it really fit for purpose? Does it need to go a little bit beyond and to bring some more flexibility? And then when it comes to micro credentials that are provided by the private sector or in other fields, here the challenge is even bigger. So these are some of the topics that we are discussing with all the experts that come from very different backgrounds, from first across the different member states, but also we have experts from higher education institutions, from ministries, from quality assurance, national agencies, etc. It's really important to have this diversity of expertise when talking about the progress that needs to be made.
Well, thank you very much. And I have to say, I regret very much the fact that we really have to wrap up the session at this stage. I think we could have definitely continued for much longer into the afternoon, but just to maybe restate the obvious beyond saying thank you very much for your dense input today, to also emphasize that, of course, as ACA and as an organization, we very much look forward to continue this dialogue with you, the colleagues in the European Commission and the broader sector, very much beyond this event as well. So thank you very much, Vanessa. Thank you very much, Leah. And I'd like to hand over to the ACA president again for the concluding remarks. Thank you.